Hello, Brubs. We're back with A Dream of Dracula in Search of the Living Dead by Leonard Wolf. Wolf, a 1972 book, and we are now entering Chapter 6 Dracula, the King Vampire. I have cut this chapter into two because it's 54 pages long, and generally a 30-page chapter in this book takes me close to an hour, so I'm not going to read for 2 straight hours. Chapter 6 Love the storm in its might of destruction. Woo the kisses of the fiery lightnings to quench themselves on your smoldering bosom. Seek all that is terrible in nature for your companions and your lover. Woo them to burn and blast you, perish in their fierce embrace, and you will be happier, far happier, than if you lived in mine, lived, oh, who can be mine and live? Melmoth the Wanderer. Christopher Lee is the best and most famous screen Dracula since Bela Lugosi. I sat in his London living room, which felt as if all its mirrors, couches, tables, and walls had been dipped into a tasteful sea green dye. Lee had the color television on and was watching an important cricket match. Sometimes he looked my way to reassure me that, as an American, I couldn't possibly understand what was happening. From what I saw of the figures on the screen, I suspected he was right. I sat back in the very soft couch and continued making notes. The match was being played at Lord's cricket ground. In a moment, when he remembered me, I gathered from Lee that Lord's is the holy of holies for cricket fans. After this message, he swung away abruptly and was back inside the TV tube. Watching him watch the game while I waited for him to tell me about Dracula, I got again the feeling that the real world is the place where nothing quite fits. Outside the house, a crank caller prowled Cadogan Square as he waited out a decent interval before he could again enter a telephone booth to call Lee. Meanwhile, I was writing down that the actor wore green trousers, buckled shoes, a soft yellow-brown plaid wool jacket, a navy blue shirt, and purple socks. Even as I wrote down what I saw, I did not expect to be believed about the socks, nor that the whole outfit looked good. It was 3:10. Lee's magazine rack was stuffed with old sports magazines, and there were huge yellow roses fully blown in a green ceramic Italian vase on a dark table near the large windows looking out on the square. Once more remembering me, Lee turned to say that when the cricket ball is hit squarely, it can travel at speeds nearing 95 miles per hour. He was a lean, tall man in his 50s, with the look of a movie star who knows how to appear youthful, distinguished, and alert, even off the screen. His hair was gray at the temples, and he wore a comfortable, drooping mustache. There he is, Christopher Lee. Just as I was wondering if I should have to pretend to be writing down a description of his wallpaper in order to seem out of his way, the cricket match was over and he swung toward me. My notes do not tell me who won the game, nor do I remember if he was pleased by the results, but suddenly he was fully into the interview for which I had come. He needed no prodding. He spoke more or less nonstop in a rich but curiously charged voice. It was at once evident that he took the role of Dracula with great seriousness, and had read all about Stoker and the folklore of the vampires. Hello, Brobs. He had very clear opinions about his relationship to the role. He pointed out that he had nothing to do with the scripts of the films he made. As a fully professional actor who has done more than 105 films, only 5 of them about Dracula, his job was to interpret the roles he got. The stories, as I've had them given me, have had almost no relation to the book, which is my reiterated complaint. Though in France I have made a version in which I played Dracula exactly as Stoker described him. I was always against the whole tie and tails rendition. Surely it is the height of the ridiculous for a vampire to step out of the shadows wearing white tie, tails, patent leather shoes, and a full cloak. No, I've never seen anyone else play the role. Sorry, that's not right. Just 10 days ago, I saw the Lugosi version for the first time because I don't think it's a good idea. And there's Christopher Lee again. For an actor to look too closely at someone else's performance. And there's Christopher Lee as Dracula. Anyhow, about the Lugosi Dracula, I was so disappointed. I was absolutely shattered. I had been wanting to see it for a long, long time 13 or 14 years. It was always described to me as a masterpiece. But though Todd Browning was a talented director, I don't think the film comes off. There are aspects of it, for instance, that I considered ridiculous. There were so many mistakes. Renfield's being on the ship is all wrong, and all that business with cobwebs in Dracula's castle is amateurish. Not even a dissolve through. And Dracula is played too nice at the beginning. Practically no menace in the character. Though the women are superbly done, there is a marvelous use of the black and white cameras. The interiors are marvelous too, but the attendant in the lunatic asylum is absolutely absurd. A scene like that carries the story into the realm of farce. It certainly breaks the mood. There is no shock or fright in it. With Dracula, certain things are important. You should never see him climbing out of his coffin. If you've noticed, I've always discovered standing beside it. I'm always discovered standing beside it. Lugosi's hands, too. He held them out stiffly, making them look like a puppet. His smile was not always sinister, either. As for me, I'm in my 50th year. I can't leap about anymore, though I can still make sharp, violent motions. What I try to do is to give the audience a sense of anxiety, to make it worry. An audience should ask, what's he going to do next? This is the essence of suspense. I came to the part the first time with very little notice. I had to hurry off to read the book, so I played it fresh with no knowledge of previous performances. I had to make some decisions. First of all, he is a nobleman, so he must be noble in his physical presence, impressive. If he was going to be irresistible to women, he had to be also a superior being. Superhumanly strong and unstoppable force, he had also to have an erotic element about him, and not because he sank his teeth into women. That erotic appeal has to be projected. No doubt, some of that power comes from the meaning of blood, as Stoker says. The blood is the life. It's a mysterious matter and has something to do with the physical appeal of the person who's draining your life. It's like being a sexual blood donor. Women are attracted to men for any of hundreds of reasons. One of them is a response to the demand to give oneself, and what greater evidence of giving is there than your blood flowing literally from your own bloodstream? It's like the complete abandonment of a woman to the power of a man. Of course, Dracula is unbelievable, but that's my job, to make the incredible credible. The only thing I can do is to suggest ways in which what he does is parallel to human experience, at the same time as I make it clear that he isn't quite sound. What I try to convey is his tremendous stillness and the way it combines with his savagery to produce a hypnotic power. And with Dracula, there is something else, the loneliness of evil, the terrible poignancy that exists in such a character. There is also sadness, resignation, that the feeling of a man who would like to be free. Remember, in Stoker's book, when he is killed, there is a look of peace on his face. So, to all of that, I have to add the sense of him as physically strong. You have to believe he could walk through a wall if he wanted to, and when all that is done, I have still to make it appear that just the same, he is vulnerable. For a while, our conversation veered to the various mechanical problems created by the role. The red contact lenses he has to wear, for example, which make it difficult for him to see. I always thought, he said, that the lenses should be used only in moments of rage or when Dracula is supposed to be satiated with blood. When I complimented him on the fine mouthful of closely packed teeth his makeup men give him, he laughed and said, "Come here." I rose from my chair and got up close to look into his mouth, where were jammed together the teeth that have loomed at me out of the screen. "They're my own," he said. "All the makeup men add are the long canines when I lunge for a victim." Lee complained about the Christian content of the films that requires him to cringe when Dracula's enemies push crucifixes in his direction. It's a detail to which the directors cling, and one which limits the actor in him. There is not much beyond the stock cowering gesture left, oh man, for him to make. As he thought the matter over, he added, "I've never diverged from my interpretation of Dracula. Within the limits of the scripts, my intentions have not changed. But as you see, they're running out of ways of bringing him back to life. The vein is being played out." I think not, and for a few moments we cheer each other by more positive reflections, in the course of which I learn that Lee is a gypsy name, that his family comes from Hampshire, which is in England, gypsy country. Gypsies have come up to me from time to time and said, "You're one of us." It may be, though, on my mother's side I am Italian. Then there was a drop in our mood once more. No, I'm not all that desirous of playing the role again. With the material available to me, there's nothing I can do with my body or my face that I haven't already done before. "One thing is sure," he said. "I'm not going to go on in the role forever and end like Lugosi, a morphine addict playing in tasteless parodies." The telephone rang, and Lee got up to answer the crank caller. Before he did, he took leave of me as I walked to the door. I caught a glimpse of a photograph of his wife, a beautiful woman in her 30s, and I had the impression that he told me he had a 7.5-year-old daughter. But actually, what I remember is his last observation made just as the phone began to ring. With a look of disgust, he described the scenes in which the stake is driven into Dracula's chest. "Loathsome," he said. "That Max Factor blood is absolutely nauseating." As the door closed behind me, I heard the former champion cricketer telling the crank caller, "No, this is not Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee is not in. May I take a message?" When, in 1897, Bram Stoker's Dracula appeared, it was still recognizable as a Gothic novel in the tradition of Walpole, Lewis, Radcliffe, and Maturin. There were the usual fearful dangers: a lustful villain, dark and mysterious mountains, crumbling architecture, a castle in Transylvania, a ruined chapel in London, a tumbling abbey in Whitby, the usual alarums and surprises, along with vaults, stone walls, and reverberating darkness in the holds of ships. A point of some importance is that the conflicts in the old fictions between antagonists were essentially physical and external. Stoker's achievement is that while he kept plenty of that machinery, thereby fulfilling an implied agreement with the literary past, he managed at the same time to make his vampire tale a gathering place for symbols of extraordinary internal meaning. In 1972, 75 years from the time of its production, Dracula is fully visible as a visionary novel in the sense that Jung defined the term, and in any case as a fiction whose allegorical power transcends the fairly narrow Christian work that Stoker made. The Christian message is certainly there, but it is quiveringly entangled in matters that sadly seem to have more modern significance. The meaning of human energy, the concept of sanity, the nature of identity, and most intensively the awful powers of sexual repression and evasion. It is an entanglement, I hardly need add, that is probably unconscious on Stoker's part and has been carefully unrecognized by a couple of generations of readers. For the most part, Dracula has been read as a rousing good thriller rather than as the great contemporary allegory of blood it certainly is. Even Montague Summers, who is prepared to dote on nearly anything vampiric, will only concede to Stoker the achievement of a brilliantly selected subject matter and occasionally admirable writing. But Summers, after praising the first four chapters, says of the book, and could the whole story have been sustained at so high a level, we should have had a complete masterpiece. In fact, we have a complete masterpiece, as shortly I will undertake to show. Dracula suffers even from its enthusiastically admiring critics who give the impression sometimes that they have another book in mind than the one that Stoker wrote. Thus, Edith Burkhead, who is not put off by what Summers calls prolixity, writes of Dracula that we are held from beginning to end in a state of frightful suspense. No one who has read the book will fail to remember the picture of Dracula climbing up the front of the castle in Transylvania. The real horror of that scene is that Dracula is climbing down, not up, and what is worse, he is climbing face down with his cloak spreading out around him like great wings. The most warmly willful reading I have yet encountered is Devendra P. Varma's. Professor Varma's presentation is so personal that it achieves a touch of literary distinction. Dracula's physical appearance, as Professor Varma gives it to us, is so much more ornamental than Stoker's that it makes me hope he will write his own version of the tale. Varma writes, the gloom is unfathomable and eerie, with the tapers burning low. The candlelight flickers, casting wavering shadows across the walls as we listen to the moan of the wind whistling through the ivy creeping on its ancient walls of stone. We enter a wide baronial hall. Thick cobwebs and ancient dust lie over everything. The texture and color of red velvet cushions have crumpled and faded. At the yawning entrance of a chamber, we see the shadowy silhouette of a tall, cloaked, and incredibly handsome figure, his dark sheen of hair rustling faintly in the breeze, a candlestick poised in his right hand, impressing us as the magnificent Prince of Darkness. In Stoker's Dracula, there is no baronial hall, though there is a welcome sight, a great bedroom well lighted and warmed with log fire. Nor are there cobwebs and dust, or red velvet cushions that have crumpled and faded. In fact, Harker writes that the curtains and upholstery of the chairs and sofas and the hangings of my bed are of the costliest and most beautiful fabrics. They are centuries old, though in excellent order. I saw something like them in Hampton Court, but there they were worn and frayed and moth-eaten. The figure of Dracula is also transformed in Professor Varma's telling. But Count Dracula is essentially a human being, a man of immense physical appeal. He exercises a hypnotic effect upon the desires of women. His movements are deft and amazingly graceful. Even within the folds of his dark flowing cape, every gesture is rich with command. His broad shoulders are framed in the glare of the candles. His pointed cane, whose ferrule is of hammered silver, reflects flashes of lightning in the night sky or sparkles like a star. The flowing cape, the cane, all seem integral parts of his personality, as if he had been born with them, and what a faded splendor his clothes have. The swallowtail coat of dark serge, worn out and shiny, the edges of his cuffs and shirt collar wilted, the purple cravat at his throat bravely affecting a swirl no longer natural to fine silk. It is an affecting description, but in Stoker there is no cape, no cane, no ferrule, no swallowtail coat, and most particularly no worn-out shiny serge, or wilted collar, or valiant bit of purple silk. What impresses me, to paraphrase Professor Varma, is the splendid way in which Stoker's figure has been filtered from its black and white elegance to a technicolor poignancy, which, had it been in Stoker's book, might have made lurid what ought to be and is magnificently stark. What Professor Varma has done is not difficult to do. By now, the Dracula legend, which is a composite of vampire folklore, bits and pieces of Stoker's novel, and a turmoil of screen versions of it, is so very much in the atmosphere of our age that it is easy to forget where one detail begins and another ends. A casual reader of the book, if he is asked to say how Dracula dies, will answer unthinkingly, with a stake through his heart, now that is film lore, but by now it is so deeply impressed in the minds even of those who have not seen one of the films that it feels like a real memory of something known as a fact. For the reason then the Stoker's that Jesus. For the reason, then, that Stoker's story is either vaguely or mistakenly in the minds of my readers, I am going to take the old fashioned risk of providing a full plot summary in the pages that follow. Anyone who is confident that he remembers the details of the novel and does not wish to be delayed by the summary is welcome to go on to page 205, where it stops. On the other hand, plot, not character or style, is Stoker's great achievement. Even the well-read Draculist may find a summary of the action refreshing. But first, a word about the technique of the novel. The story of Dracula emerges from what purports to be a collection of letters, journals, business memoranda, and transcriptions of phonograph recordings, which various of the characters have made and which have been put into sequence, both in the course of the action and later by Mina Harker. This procedure Stoker borrowed immediately from Wilkie Collins, who in turn was working in the tradition of the epistolary novel, which he much modified for his use. It is a technique that allows for various voices to present the action and permits swiftly changing points of view to be put before the reader. In Stoker's hands, it serves also to create an atmosphere that lends itself to the way ordinary daily things can slip into the realm of nightmare, as if the postman, the telegraph boy, the pocket diary, and the phonograph machine were the appropriate arbiters of the high drama of our lives. The Midland, a wheat field in Transylvania. Looks pretty barren. Now, as Dracula begins, we find ourselves reading a transcription of Jonathan Harker's journal, kept originally in shorthand. It is May 3rd, in an unspecified late 19th century year, and we learn that Harker, a young British solicitor, is on his way to the castle of Count Dracula, with whom he has some real estate business to settle. The castle is in a dimly known corner of the Transylvanian mountains, and young Harker is much taken by the landscape and the picturesque indigenous population, though he is aware of a certain strangeness of mood that is coming over him as he travels closer to his destination. The trains, for one thing, do not run on time the farther east he goes, and he has begun to have bad dreams. The next afternoon in Bistritza, at the hotel, the Golden Crone, his landlady, is much agitated at his departure in the stagecoach toward the castle Dracula and warns him that it is the eve of St. George's Day. Do you know that tonight, when the clock strikes midnight, all the evil things in the world will have full sway? However, there was business to be done, and I could allow nothing to interfere with it, writes Harker, but not to be ungracious. He accepts the crucifix she offers him and allows her to put it around his neck. The journey to Castle Dracula is described at length. Two things are memorable. It is a journey through springtime opulence, fruit blossoms, apple, plum, pear, cherry, up toward and into the craggy mountain country of wind and snow. And it is the voyage of a candid, clear eyed, honest Englishman, moving deeper and deeper into a psychological landscape in which darkness, deceit, and ancient superstition are as natural as breathing. When Harker reaches the point overlooking the Borgo Pass, near which the castle is supposed to be, the coach is met by a caleche whose bearded driver has a hard looking mouth, with very red lips and sharp looking teeth as white as ivory, and a hand which caught my arm in a grip of steel. This figure who drives Harker to Castle Dracula is no doubt the Count himself. The drive on which he takes young Harker is filled with danger, heavy snow, precipitous rocks, fields in which mysterious blue flames play, and howling red eyed wolves. Suddenly they have arrived in the courtyard of a vast ruined castle, from whose tall black windows came no ray of light, and whose broken battlements showed a jagged line against the moonlit sky. It is here that Harker meets the Dracula he is to know. Then there was the sound of rattling chains and the clanking of massive bolts drawn back. A key was turned with the loud grating noise of long disuse, and the great door swung back. Within stood a tall old man, clean shaven save for a long white mustache, and clad in black from head to foot, without a single speck of color about him anywhere. He held in his hand an antique silver lamp in which the flame burned, without chimney or globe of any kind, throwing long, quivering shadows as it flickered in the draught of the open door. The old man motioned me in with his right hand, with a courtly gesture, saying in excellent English, but with a strange intonation, "Welcome to my house. Enter freely and of your own will." He made no motion of stepping to meet me, but stood like a statue, as though his gesture of welcome had fixed him into stone. The instant, however, that I had stepped over the threshold, he moved impulsively forward, and holding out his hand, grasped mine with a strength which made me wince, an effect which was not lessened by the fact that it seemed as cold as ice, more like the hand of a dead than a living man. Again he said, "Welcome to my house. Come freely, go safely, and leave something of the happiness you bring." I said interrogatively, "Count Dracula?" He bowed in a courtly way as he replied, "I am Dracula." In the ensuing days, Harker learns to know him well. The Count's treatment of Harker is at once correct and friendly. His conversation is sophisticated, charming, something passionate, as when he talks of his own family history. Though the castle is largely in ruins, there are spacious rooms in it where fireplaces throw off congenial warmth, but the sense of wealth and cultivation is strangely qualified. There are no mirrors anywhere. The Count is thrown into a demoniac frenzy at the sight of blood when Harker cuts himself shaving. Slowly, Harker comes to the realization that he is in the presence, in fact, he is the prisoner of a race-proud descendant of Attila the Hun, a creature filled with an unearthly evil energy who warns him against falling asleep anywhere in the castle except in the room assigned to him, and whose designs on him are as yet unclear. One evening Harker sees by soft yellow moonlight the Count, the whole man slowly emerging from the window, and begin to crawl down the castle wall over the dreadful abyss, face down. On another occasion, when the Count has gone out in his lizard fashion, Harker explores the castle and comes upon a romantic chamber where of old ladies had sat in the sun and lived sweet lives. In this place, lulled by the solitude, he falls asleep, only to wake in the presence of three beautiful women. All three had brilliant white teeth that shone like pearls against the ruby of their voluptuous lips. I felt in my heart a wicked, burning desire that they would kiss me with those red lips. They whispered together, and then they all three laughed. Such a silvery, musical laugh, but as hard as though the sound never could have come through the softness of human lips. It was like the intolerable, tingling sweetness of water glasses when played on by a cunning hand. This scene is invaded by a furious count who forbids the women to meddle with Harker until he is done with him. To appease them, he flings a bag at them containing what sounds like a half smothered child. Harker, overcome, faints away. The episode has, however, instructed him the women are bloodsuckers, and the Count no doubt is too. Later, Harker makes his way down the castle wall to the room toward which he has seen the Count scuttle. Oh. There, in the vault of an old chapel, he finds his host lying in a cataleptic state in a box on a pile of newly dug earth. His eyes open, his cheeks warm with life. His lips, Harker writes, were as red as ever. The sight confirms him in his fears, and he casts about for a way to escape. He bribes the gypsies working about the castle, but his plot is foiled by the Count. Once again, Harker goes in daylight to the vault, hoping to find a key that will help him in an escape attempt. This time he finds Dracula. There's Whitby Harbor. I don't know. Is that where Dracula's set? I don't know. We shall see. There lay the Count, but looking as if his youth had been half renewed, for the white hair and mustache were changed to dark iron gray. The cheeks were fuller, and the white skin seemed ruby red underneath. The mouth was redder than ever, for on the lips were gouts of fresh blood which trickled from the corners of the mouth and ran over the chin and neck. Even the deep burning eyes seemed set amongst swollen flesh, for the lids and pouches underneath were bloated. It seemed as if the whole awful creature were simply gorged with blood. He lay like a filthy leech, exhausted with his repletion. There was a mocking smile on the bloated face, which seemed to drive me mad. This was the being I was helping to transfer to London, where perhaps for centuries to come he might, amongst its teeming millions, satiate his lust for blood and create a new and ever-widening circle of semi-demons to batten on the helpless. Maddened by what he sees and fears, Harker grasps a shovel and brings its edge down, striking at the hateful face, but the head turns. Harker sees the eyes with their terrible glance, and fear aborts the movement of the blow. He succeeds only in making a deep gash on the Count's forehead. His June 30 entry in his journal is the last we see of Harker for a long time. At least God's mercy is better than that of these monsters, and the precipice is steep and high. At its foot a man may sleep as a man. Goodbye, all. Mina. After this, there is a sudden shift in the book's setting, tone, and style as we get a series of letters and journal entries that carry us back to England, where we meet Mina Murray, Harker's fiancée, Lucy Westenra, her close friend and former schoolfellow, Dr. John Seward, the director of a London mental hospital, his patient R.M. Renfield, and Dr. Seward's friends, the wealthy Arthur Holmwood, and the slangy young, the suicide seat in Whitby. Texan Quincy Morris. Lucy, who lives with her widowed mother, writes to Mina to say that she has received 3 proposals in a single day from Dr. Seward, Quincy Morris, and Arthur Holmwood, respectively. Since she has already set her heart on Holmwood, she makes him and herself happy by accepting him. The 2 rejected suitors swear friendship to the lucky Arthur and his bride-to-be. The three friends, one ought to add, are in their 20s, and we are given to understand that their friendship has been fiercely tested in strange and dangerous parts of the world. With these persons before us, we have met all but one of the central characters of the tale. Dr. Van Helsing will come later. 3 weeks from the last entry in Jonathan Harker's diary, July 24th, we learn from Mina's journal that she is Lucy's house guest in Whitby, a seaside town in the north of England where there is an ancient ruined abbey. Back in London, Dr. Seward's journals give us more information about Renfield, his zoophagous patient who catches and swallows flies and spiders. Renfield seems anxious to work his way up to larger creatures because he begs for a kitten. In Whitby on July 27th, Lucy Westerna's behavior turns strange. We learn that she has a history of sleepwalking and that her father had the same habit. At the same time, by means of newspaper accounts, beginning August 8, we are told that a Russian ship, the Demeter, has run aground in Whitby after an unreasonable storm. The ship has no survivors, though its captain is found dead, self-lashed to his mast with a horrid account in his log of the mysterious destruction by a fiend or monster of his entire crew on the ship's voyage from the Black Sea port of Varna. As the ship runs aground, a huge dog is seen to leap from it to the shore. A domestic dog found nearby with its throat torn and the death by violence of an old retired seaman whom Mina and Lucy had befriended are further signals to the reader that Dracula is here. Mina Murray, in her August 11th entry, tells of finding Lucy after a sleepwalking episode lying on a favorite seat of theirs, a suicide's gravestone near the ruined abbey overlooking Whitby Harbor. When she catches up with Lucy, she sees something long and black bending over the half-reclining figure, and when Mina cries out, something raised the head, and from where I was, I could see a white face and red, gleaming eyes. Lucy has been bitten by the vampire. Lucy is progressively weakened by nighttime visits from Dracula, who, we learn, inhabits the suicide's grave. On one occasion, Mina sees Lucy leaning her head out of her bedroom window. Lucy is asleep and something is sitting beside her that looks like a good-sized bird. By the time Mina reaches Lucy, her friend is breathing heavily, her hand at her throat, and there is a drawn, haggard look under her eyes. Both Lucy and Mina are puzzled by marks that look like pinpricks on Lucy's neck. In the midst of Lucy's torment, we are told that her mother is suffering from a soon-to-be fatal heart illness, and that her fiancé's father, Lord Godalming, is also dangerously sick. We learn, too, that 50 boxes of common earth, which were the cargo carried by the Demeter, have been shipped to London. On August 19, Mina Murray has a letter from a sister Agatha in a Budapest hospital informing her that Jonathan is being nursed back to health there. While Mina is exclaiming joy, joy in Whitby, Dr. John Seward in London is noting that his patient Renfield is behaving strangely, enigmatically saying, I am here to do your bidding, master. I am your slave, and you will reward me. Dracula, we may surmise, is in London. In Whitby, Lucy's health takes a turn for the better, and Mina goes off to Budapest to disappear from the novel for a while, though not before informing Lucy of her intended marriage to a pale, convalescent Jonathan Harker. After a brief period of well-being in Whitby, Lucy returns to London. In an August 24 entry in her journal, she writes that I seem to be dreaming again. It is all dark and horrid. I feel so weak and worn out. From this point on until Lucy's first death, the narrative moves between Lucy's physical destruction by Dracula and its counterpart, the strange fluctuations in the psyche of the patient Renfield. The stories of Lucy and Renfield merge when Arthur Holmwood, disturbed by what is happening to Lucy, calls in his friend Seward to examine her. Seward, puzzled by an illness that seems to have no identifiable origin, sends for his friend, the famous Dr. Van Helsing, an Amsterdam physician with whom Seward once studied. For a time, the battle for Lucy's life appears to be only a medical one. Van Helsing performs a blood transfusion with Arthur Holmwood as the first donor. Before she dies, poor Lucy will have received the blood of 4 loyal friends in her veins: Holmwood's, Seward's, Morris's, and Van Helsing's. It does not take Van Helsing long to decide that something uncommon is happening to Lucy, and without taking Seward into his confidence, he begins to treat her for symptoms beyond the reach of medicine. Garlic flowers are placed in her bedroom, and the household is instructed not to move the ill smelling blooms from either the windows or from Lucy's neck, where a wreath of them has been put. Van Helsing's precautions are rendered futile when Lucy's mother, ignorant of Van Helsing's orders, takes the flowers away from the window to let in a little fresh air. The consequences for Lucy are disastrous, and she is only saved on this occasion by another transfusion. Once again, the garlic flowers are deployed, and for a time Lucy sleeps peacefully until one night Berserker, a wolf escaped from the London Zoo, smashes the window of her bedroom. Lucy's mother, who has been invited to share her bed, dies of a heart attack as she beholds in the aperture of the broken panes the head of a great gaunt gray wolf, not gaunty, the last that Lucy sees before she sinks into unconsciousness. Beside her mother's already cooling body is a whole myriad of little specks, blowing in through the broken window and wheeling and circling. In the morning, Seward and Van Helsing find a house full of inert women, 4 maids drugged in the living room, and in the bedroom, Lucy's mother lying dead beside an unconscious, ghastly pale Lucy. In what Seward describes as a stand-up fight with death, he and Van Helsing battle, heat, chafe, force brandy down the throat of the exhausted girl and bring her back to a semblance of life. But Lucy is too far gone. Even a 4th transfusion, this time of Quincy Morris's American blood, can do no more than permit her to linger for a while. On the morning of September 20th, sometime between 8 and 9 o'clock, Lucy Westerna has her death agony, in the course of which she becomes, for a moment, a creature as lascivious and lovely as the women Harker saw at Castle Dracula. She calls to Arthur Holmwood in a soft, voluptuous voice, "Arthur, kiss me," and it takes the sternest interference from Van Helsing to prevent the embrace. That the old doctor did the right thing we know because Lucy, in a changed voice, thanks him with untellable pathos. Then she is dead, but the marks at her throat, whose white, worn, ragged edges have so perplexed Seward, are gone. Van Helsing, seeing this, says sadly that there is no further need to perform an autopsy on the body. Chapter 13 is chiefly devoted to Lucy's funeral, but in it we learn also that Jonathan Harker and Mina in London to attend the funeral of their patron, Mr. Hawkins, are struck by the sight of a tall man with a black mustache and pointed beard who is staring hard at a pretty girl. Jonathan says, "I believe it is the Count, but he has grown young." After this scene, we are back in Seward's journal, and the mournful note is resumed as he describes Lucy's funeral and the hours that follow it. Seward closes his diary with great bitterness. Only 29 years old, he takes up his life work sadly and without hope. Fini. The chapter does not end there. The next item the reader encounters is a newspaper account, September 25, of the appearance of a strange woman in black who has enticed little children onto Hampstead Heath, where they have been found in the morning slightly torn or wounded in the throat. With the stories of the Bloofer lady, the third section of the novel begins. Here, the Jonathan Harker story is directly merged with the Lucy Westenra account. They have, of course, been linked before by the role of Mina Murray as Harker's fiancée and Lucy's best friend, but now the Harkers and what one may think of as Lucy's survivors, Arthur Holmwood, now Lord Godalming, John Seward, and the American Quincy Morris, are brought together by Dr. Van Helsing, who forms them into a band dedicated to the destruction of the vampire. The narrative of Section 3 has two aspects. It gives us the details of Lucy's second death, and in it, Van Helsing, as priest, physician, teacher, instructs the band in the lore of the vampire. The staking of Lucy does not involve the Harkers. This task is reserved for the four men who shed their blood for her sake. However, before the demonic Lucy can be destroyed, Dr. Seward must be convinced that she is indeed the Bloofer lady, preying on toddlers on Hampstead Heath. The proof is not long in coming. Seward sees her empty coffin and her white figure flitting through the churchyard at night. By day, he sees her, if possible, more radiantly beautiful than ever, in her coffin. The same demonstration is repeated for Lord Godalming, with even greater effect because the spectre Lucy, confronted by Arthur, has features whose sweetness was turned to adamantine, heartless cruelty, and the purity to voluptuous wantonness. What Van Helsing, Morris, Godalming, and Seward see in that midnight graveyard is a Lucy whose lips were crimson with fresh blood, and that the stream had trickled over her chin and stained the purity of her lawn death robe. Lucy's eyes were unclean and full of hellfire, instead of the pure, gentle orbs we knew. When this figure callously flings aside a child at whose throat she has been feeding and reaches out toward Arthur, saying, "Come to me. Leave these others and come to me. My arms are hungry for you." Arthur, in a trance, moves toward her, only to be saved by Van Helsing's interposition with his little golden crucifix. This holy object sends the snarling Lucy back to her tomb, and Arthur, convinced by what he has seen, brokenly permits Van Helsing to do as you will. There can be no horror like this ever any more. The next day, the four men, already identified by Van Helsing as Lucy's symbolic husbands, since their blood flows in her veins, gather in her tomb, where Arthur, her fiancé, is given the privilege of destroying the voluptuous body that lies there. Van Helsing explains the meaning of what they are about to do. All that die from the preying of the undead become themselves undead and prey on their kind. Lucy, he tells them, has been cursed with a foul immortality, and the career of this so unhappy dear lady is just begun. To prevent further victims and to bring her soul peace, this stake must be driven through her. Arthur does what he is told, and as Van Helsing reads from a missal, he strikes the thing in the coffin, writhed, and a hideous blood-curdling screech came from the opened red lips. The body shook and quivered and twisted in wild contortions, but Arthur never faltered. Whilst the blood from the pierced heart welled and spurted, his face was set, and his high duty seemed to shine through it. The sight of it gave us courage, so that our voices seemed to ring through the little vault. When it is all over, Seward writes, one and all we felt that the holy calm on her face was only an earthly token and symbol of the calm that was to reign forever. Now Mina and Jonathan Harker join Seward, Godalming, and Quincy Morris directly, and under Van Helsing's leadership, the hunt for Dracula begins in full earnest. Mina is put to work transcribing and coordinating the journal entries, phonograph diaries, and correspondence that already exist. With Van Helsing to guide them, the men set out to find Dracula's various hiding places. At intervals, meanwhile, the mental patient Renfield is desperately, though unclearly, trying to warn them to get Mina away from Seward's hospital. He makes a touching effort to persuade Seward of his own sanity and asks to be released, but Seward balks at the last moment. By now it is October 1. The men go off to Carfax, the estate right next door to Seward's hospital, where they have discovered Dracula has a hiding place. When Harker returns from that unsuccessful excursion, an excellent rat-infested episode, he finds Mina sleeping, breathing so softly that I had to put my ear down to hear. She looked paler than usual, and in her journal Mina tells us the red and fearful character of her dreams, from which the reader, though not Mina, knows that Dracula has been at her. In a conversation with Renfield, Seward becomes aware that his patient has been dealing with the vampire, and goes off to report what he knows to the Dutch physician. But before he or Van Helsing can make much of the hint they have been given, they are informed that Renfield has been found in a pool of his own blood. The next several pages recount Renfield's spiritually triumphant martyrdom. Dracula has smashed his skull and broken his neck and back. Dr. Van Helsing, hoping to save his life, performs a trephining operation from which Renfield emerges to brief consciousness, able to tell how he resisted Dracula, the satanic tempter, even in the fog of his unreason. He also tells his listeners how Dracula used him to gain entry to Seward's hospital and that Mina is already a victim of the vampire. Van Helsing, Morris, Godalming, how the hell do you say that? Godalming? 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 And Seward hurry off to the Harkers' bedroom, but they have to break the door down to get in. What they find is this. On the bed beside the window lay Jonathan Harker, his face flushed and breathing heavily as though in a stupor. Kneeling on the near edge of the bed, facing outwards, was the white-clad figure of his wife. By her side stood a tall, thin man, clad in black. His face was turned from us, but the instant we saw it, we all recognized the Count. With his left hand he held both Mrs. Harker's hands, keeping them away with her arms at full tension. His right hand gripped her by the back of the neck, forcing her face down on his bosom. Her white nightdress was smeared with blood, and a thin stream trickled down the man's bare breast, which was shown by his torn open dress. The attitude of the two had a terrible resemblance to a child forcing a kitten's nose into a saucer of milk to compel it to drink. For a few seconds, Mina Harker lay in her helpless attitude and disarray. Her face was ghastly with a pallor which was accentuated by the blood which smeared her lips and cheeks and chin. From her throat trickled a thin stream of blood. From this scene, a disconcerted but by no means cowed Dracula escapes as a thin vapor, but Mina knows herself to be unclean, unclean, and cries that she must touch or kiss Jonathan no more. Severely shaken, the band, when Jonathan is restored to consciousness, here's Mina's version of how the blood exchange between herself and the vampire came about. Dracula was specific about its meaning, telling her, "And you, their best beloved one, are now to me flesh of my flesh, blood of my blood, kin of my kin. When my brain says come, to you, you shall cross land or sea to do my bidding." And we will stop there because this is, as I said, a 54-page chapter, and I'm not reading 54 pages, considering that I still have 24 pages to go. So that's going to be it for now, bros. My guy, keep reading. Can't keep reading, bud. It is not practical to read another hour straight. I can't do it, props. How many more pages are left in this whole book? 304, so 104 pages left. That's all, props. Anything else to add? Since I'm at the 56-minute mark of this rendering. All right, we gotta remove this thing. This thing's no longer doing us any help. All right, I guess that's it. Goodbye, bro.